Did you know that the average person makes over 35,000 decisions every single day? And that each of these choices, from what to wear to which career to pursue, is slowly draining your happiness. Right now, you're probably staring at a streaming service with thousands of shows, yet nothing feels worth watching. Or maybe you've spent hours scrolling through dating profiles, each swipe leaving you more dissatisfied than the last. If this sounds familiar, you're experiencing what psychologists call the paradox of choice, and it's silently sabotaging your life satisfaction. In 2020, a groundbreaking study found that people with fewer options were 43% more likely to report feeling content with their decisions compared to those faced with abundant choices. Think about that. Nearly half of your potential happiness might be vanishing simply because you have too many options. But here's what's truly fascinating. Our brains were never designed to handle the overwhelming number of choices we face in the modern world. When early humans had to choose between hunting in the East or West Valley, they weren't paralyzed by indecision. Today, we face choice overload everywhere. More than 40,000 products in supermarkets, endless career paths, and infinite digital content. All of this is causing a genuine psychological crisis. Analysis paralysis, buyer's remorse, and perpetual fear of missing out aren't character flaws. They're predictable responses to an environment that's overloaded our decision-making circuitry. This paradox affects 4 critical areas of your life and reveals counterintuitive strategies that genuinely happy people use to make decisions. Here's the twist. The secret to a more satisfied life isn't having endless options, but knowing exactly when and how to limit them. When you face too many options, your brain undergoes measurable stress responses. Neuroscientists have discovered that when presented with excessive choices, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making, shows patterns of activity remarkably similar to those seen during chronic stress. Think about the last time you tried to pick a restaurant for dinner with friends. As the options piled up, you likely experienced what psychologists call decision fatigue, a measurable depletion in your brain's ability to make good choices. It's not just in your head, it's a biological response. Barry Schwartz, the psychologist who popularized the term paradox of choice, identified 2 distinct decision-making styles that determine how we respond to abundant options. First are the maximizers, people who obsessively seek the absolute best option, comparing every alternative before deciding. Then there are the satisficers, those who set criteria for what's good enough and choose the first option that meets their standards. His research revealed something counterintuitive. Maximizers, despite finding objectively better options, consistently report lower satisfaction with their choices than satisficers. In one study of job seekers, maximizers secured positions with 20% higher starting salaries, but reported feeling worse about their jobs than satisficers who accepted the first decent offer. Why does this happen? Because maximizing creates 3 psychological traps. First is opportunity cost. Each additional option increases the shadow of what you're giving up. When you have just 2 ice cream flavors, choosing chocolate means only missing out on vanilla. But with 31 flavors, choosing chocolate means missing out on 30 alternatives, creating a constant nagging sense of loss. Second is expectation inflation. More options raise our expectations about how perfect the right choice should be. In a famous jam study by Sheena Iyengar, shoppers who saw 24 jam varieties were initially more attracted, but were 10 times less likely to make a purchase than those who saw only 6 varieties. Their heightened expectations made it impossible for any single jam to seem satisfying enough. The third trap is self-blame. When you have limited options and make a disappointing choice, it's easy to blame external circumstances. But with abundant options, the responsibility falls entirely on you. If you're unhappy with your choice of career, partner, or even coffee maker, when you had countless options, the only person to blame is yourself. This creates a toxic cycle of regret and self-criticism. What's particularly alarming is that we're now facing more choices than ever before. In the 1970s, the average supermarket carried about 9,000 products. Today, that number exceeds 40,000. Dating apps provide seemingly infinite potential partners. Streaming services offer thousands of shows, and social media presents an endless array of ways to spend our time. Our primitive decision-making machinery, evolved for simpler environments with fewer choices, simply wasn't designed for this onslaught of options. It's like trying to run modern software on an ancient computer. System crashes are inevitable. Choice overload isn't just about the number of options. It's about how decisions are framed. A groundbreaking study at Columbia University found that merely reframing identical options as 11 categories with 6 choices each, rather than 66 individual options, significantly reduced decision paralysis. This demonstrates that the architecture of choice matters as much as the quantity. The psychological strain you feel when choosing a career path, deciding where to live, or even selecting what to watch isn't a personal failing. It's the predictable result of a mismatch between your brain's capabilities and your environment. Understanding this mismatch is essential for developing strategies to overcome it. Choice overload manifests significantly in one of the most important domains of life: relationships. The paradox of choice is transforming how people connect with others, often in ways that undermine happiness. Dating apps have fundamentally altered modern romance. In a typical city, a single person now has potential access to thousands of compatible partners through apps like Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge. This unprecedented abundance of romantic options triggers the classic paradox of choice. Sociologist Eva Illouz documented a significant shift in how people evaluate potential partners in the digital age. Pre-dating app generations typically assessed compatibility through face-to-face interaction, focusing on chemistry and shared values. Today's daters operate more like consumers comparing products, creating mental checklists of desired traits and dismissing potential matches for minor perceived flaws. The result is a fundamental change in how relationships form. Excessive dating options, reduced commitment and satisfaction among couples. People with many perceived alternatives were 31% more likely to report relationship dissatisfaction and 23% more likely to end relationships than those with fewer perceived options. Psychologist Barry Schwartz calls this the grass is greener syndrome, the persistent belief that a better match exists somewhere in the vast pool of alternatives. Dating app users often report dating fatigue, a state of emotional exhaustion stemming from endless swiping, messaging, and first dates that rarely progress to meaningful connections. In a 2022 survey, 63% of active dating app users reported feeling burned out from the dating process. The paradox emerges clearly. More potential partners leads to fewer sustainable relationships. The rise of dating apps and expanded options has created a new relationship challenge: the emergence of opportunistic daters, individuals who maintain emotional distance in their current relationships while constantly surveying potential better matches. This behavior, where people treat relationships as temporary arrangements while remaining open to upgrades, has become so common that dating professionals now regularly counsel clients on how to identify whether their partners are truly committed or merely using them as placeholders until something better comes along. Even established relationships suffer from choice abundance. Extramarital dating sites like Ashley Madison explicitly market the idea that better alternatives exist. The proliferation of such services correlates with increased divorce rates in locations where they gain popularity. The paradox extends beyond romantic relationships to friendships. Digital connection makes it possible to maintain loose ties with hundreds or thousands of acquaintances. A Stanford University study found that the average Facebook user has 338 friends, but considers only 10 to 20 to be genuine close connections. This disparity between quantity and quality creates a new form of social isolation. People surrounded by shallow connections but lacking deep relationships. Research has established that humans can cognitively maintain approximately 150 meaningful social relationships, with only about 5 to 15 truly intimate connections. The artificial expansion of social networks beyond these natural cognitive limits tends to dilute relationship quality. Individuals who intentionally restrict their social circles to fewer but deeper connections report 28% higher relationship satisfaction scores compared to those who maintain extensive but shallow networks. This pattern extends to family relationships. Parents face unprecedented choices about child-rearing approaches, from sleep training methods to educational philosophies. Each decision carries weighty perceived consequences, creating what sociologists call intensive parenting, an anxious, perfectionistic approach to child rearing, dominated by fear of making the wrong choice. Parents with fewer perceived options report less anxiety and greater confidence in their parenting decisions. Some relationship therapists now specifically treat what they call choice paralysis in couples, the inability to fully commit to relationship milestones due to persistent fear that better options exist. Successful treatment often involves deliberately limiting perceived alternatives rather than expanding them. These findings contradict the popular narrative that more choice in relationships leads to better outcomes. The evidence consistently shows that limiting options, whether through geographic constraints, commitment to particular communities, or intentional filtering of dating pools, correlates with healthier, more satisfying relationships. The paradox of choice in relationships ultimately highlights a fundamental truth. Human connection thrives, not on maximizing options, but on the willingness to forego alternatives in favor of depth. This principle extends directly to another domain where choice abundance creates similar problems: consumer decisions. The modern marketplace bombards consumers with unprecedented choice. The average supermarket carries over 40,000 products, up from 9,000 in the 1970s. A typical electronics store offers dozens of nearly identical televisions with minor variations in specifications. Online shopping has multiplied these options exponentially. This abundance creates what economists call choice overload, a state where excessive options impair decision-making ability. A landmark JAM study demonstrated this effect conclusively. When shoppers encountered a display with 24 jam varieties, 60% stopped to sample them, but only 3% made a purchase. When the display featured just 6 jams, fewer shoppers, about 40%, stopped, but 30% made a purchase, a tenfold increase in sales. This paradox repeats across product categories. When choosing between 5 retirement investment options, 75% of employees enrolled in 401k plans. When presented with 30 options, participation dropped to 61%. Each additional option reduced participation by approximately 2%. More choice actively undermined financial security. The financial consequences of choice paralysis extend beyond retirement. Consumer psychologists at Harvard Business School found that shoppers facing abundant options employ one of three suboptimal strategies. First, decision avoidance, simply deferring the purchase entirely. Retailers report that shopping cart abandonment rates increase by 46% when products have too many customization options. Second, satisficing, selecting the most familiar option regardless of its suitability. This explains why market-leading brands maintain dominance despite competitors offering objectively superior alternatives. Third, delegating, outsourcing decisions to experts or algorithms. The explosive growth of subscription services that eliminate choice, meal kits, clothing subscriptions, curated beauty boxes, directly responds to choice fatigue. Consumers willingly pay premiums to avoid making selections themselves. Choice abundance also diminishes satisfaction after purchase. Marketing professor Cassie Mogelner's research at Wharton found that consumers presented with extensive options report 23% lower satisfaction with their final selection than those choosing from limited options. This buyer's remorse stems from heightened expectations and increased awareness of foregone alternatives. The financial services industry exemplifies this pattern. When Charles Schwab introduced zero-fee trading, eliminating the cost barrier to investment options, trading volume increased 74%. However, investor satisfaction decreased 11%, and portfolio performance declined 8%, as investors jumped between alternatives rather than committing to long-term strategies. Paradoxically, brands that deliberately limit options often outperform competitors with extensive selections. In-N-Out Burger offers just 4 food items on its menu. Apple releases one flagship phone model annually, while competitors offer dozens. Trader Joe's stocks 4,000 products compared to Whole Foods' 20,000. These companies recognize that curated scarcity creates more satisfied customers and stronger brand loyalty. Neuroimaging studies reveal why constraint works. Brain regions associated with anxiety show reduced activity when decisions involve fewer options. Conversely, choice abundance activates the anterior cingulate cortex, a region implicated in conflict monitoring and worry. The effective solution isn't eliminating choice, but implementing what behavioral economists call choice architecture, the strategic organization of options. When Netflix redesigned its interface to show fewer, more personalized recommendations rather than its full catalog, viewing time increased 27%. When 401k plans introduced pre-selected investment bundles while maintaining individual options, participation rates jumped 15%. The most effective consumer environments maintain autonomy while providing structure. Psychologist Claude Messner calls this the freedom of constraint, the counterintuitive idea that boundaries enable more satisfying choices. This principle applies directly to the next domain, where choice abundance creates significant problems: career decisions and productivity. Career paths have multiplied exponentially in recent decades. The US Bureau of Labor Statistics now tracks over 840 occupational categories, many of which didn't exist 20 years ago. College students face over 1,800 different majors across American universities. The advent of remote work, gig economy platforms, and digital entrepreneurship has further expanded career possibilities. This explosion of options creates extreme decision difficulty. Research from the University of Pennsylvania found that 39% of recent graduates report severe anxiety about career choices, with 67% citing too many options as a primary source of stress. This represents a 58% increase in career decision anxiety compared to graduates from the 1980s. This phenomenon is called infinite branching in career trajectories. Each career decision creates multiple future decision points, with each subsequent choice exponentially increasing possible life paths. A single professional at age 25 faces over 300,000 potential career paths by age 45, according to computational models. This overwhelming complexity often leads to decision paralysis. The paradox manifests clearly in hiring outcomes. In a 10-year longitudinal study, job seekers who focused on fewer, carefully targeted positions secured employment 37 days faster than those applying broadly across multiple industries. The focused candidates also reported 41% higher job satisfaction after 2 years. More options actively undermined both efficiency and outcome quality. Modern workplaces exacerbate choice overload through flexibility. Open workspaces offer multiple seating options. Flexible hours require deciding when to work. Project management systems present dozens of potential tasks. Communication occurs across multiple platforms. Each decision depletes cognitive resources needed for substantive work. Gloria Mark at the University of California found that the average knowledge worker switches tasks every 3 minutes and 5 seconds, with 96.5 switches occurring in a typical 8-hour workday. Each switch requires a decision, depleting the limited cognitive resource of attention. Workers who deliberately constrained their options, working on single tasks for designated periods without digital interruptions, completed comparable work 37% faster than those operating without constraints. Career satisfaction shows the same counterintuitive pattern. Cal Newport's research on career capital found that workers who committed deeply to specific skills rather than maintaining multiple options reported 44% higher career satisfaction after 5 years than those who preserved flexibility. The narrower paths produced more satisfaction than the wider ones. The gig economy exemplifies this paradox. Independent workers report initial excitement about job flexibility, but significantly lower satisfaction over time compared to those with structured employment. After 2 years, 63% of independent contractors experienced anxiety about unlimited options, with 47% actively seeking more structure. Decision avoidance manifests in career development as well. LinkedIn data reveals that professionals with excessive job options experience 31% longer delays between career advancements than those with more constrained paths. Analysis of these patterns suggests that evaluating too many options creates decision fatigue that prevents any forward movement. The most productive knowledge workers systematically eliminate choices rather than maintaining them. Research into high performers across various fields reveals that approximately 81% deliberately constrain their daily decisions through systems like restricted work hours, limited communication channels, predefined decision criteria, and routinized schedules. Digital distractions represent an extreme form of workplace choice overload. The average smartphone user can access over 2 million apps, creating infinite possibilities for attention diversion. Research found that workers who disabled notifications and limited digital options completed comparable tasks 26% faster, with 29% fewer errors than those working with unconstrained digital environments. These findings across career development, workplace productivity, and digital distraction consistently demonstrate a core principle of behavioral psychology. Human performance improves with appropriate constraints. Freedom from choice often produces better outcomes than freedom of choice. This principle forms the foundation for practical strategies to overcome the paradox. After decades of research examining how unlimited options often diminish, rather than enhance well-being across our relationships, consumer decisions, careers, and productivity, 4 key techniques have emerged for more effective decision-making. 1. Eliminate unnecessary choices from your daily life. Successful figures like Steve Jobs wore identical outfits daily, while digital minimalists delete non-essential apps. Research shows that cutting just 20% of daily decisions significantly reduces cognitive load and improves overall decision quality. 2. Categorize numerous options into meaningful groups. Studies show that organizing choices, like presenting 30 investment options as 5 categories, increases participation by 23% compared to uncategorized lists, as our brains process categories more efficiently. 3. Concretize by replacing abstract criteria with specific requirements. Instead of seeking vague qualities like a nice neighborhood or chemistry in dating, define concrete metrics like maximum 20-minute commute or makes me laugh multiple times per conversation. 4. Condition your approach to complex decisions incrementally, rather than evaluating all aspects simultaneously. When choosing electronics, select an operating system first, then price range, then camera quality. This sequential approach reduced decision paralysis by 47% in consumer electronics purchases. Beyond these tactics, 3 strategic mindset shifts can mitigate the negative effects of abundant choice. Adopt satisficing over maximizing by setting acceptable thresholds and selecting the first option that meets them, rather than exhaustively comparing all possibilities. Harvard research found maximizers experience 21% higher rates of decision regret than satisficers. Implement strategic ignorance by deliberately avoiding information about certain options. Consumers who committed to purchases without researching alternatives reported 38% higher satisfaction with identical products than those who extensively compared options. Practice gratitude for constraints to counteract the cultural pressure to maximize options. Humans consistently overestimate how much happiness additional choices provide, while participants who listed benefits of their limitations reported 34% higher life satisfaction scores. These principles apply differently across domains, from nurturing deep relationships rather than many shallow connections, to establishing personal shopping rules, to focusing on specific career skills rather than perpetual exploration. The paradox ultimately reveals that meaningful freedom comes not from unlimited options, but from choosing well among limited ones. Ancient Stoics recognized this truth, with Epictetus noting, "Freedom is not procured by a full enjoyment of what is desired, but by controlling desire." Modern research confirms this wisdom. Happiness often involves not expanding options, but thoughtfully constraining them. By implementing these strategies, you can transform the paradox of choice from a source of anxiety into a pathway toward more meaningful decisions and greater contentment. If you found value in these insights, hit the subscribe button to join our community of intentional decision makers. Each week, we explore practical strategies for cutting through life's complexities and finding clarity. Drop a comment sharing one area where you could benefit from fewer choices. Until next time, remember, constraint isn't limitation, it's liberation.